Welcome to Legal Connect, where each week we sit down with top lawyers to demystify the process of hiring and working with legal counsel in today's world. From navigating the legal system to understanding your rights, our expert guests will provide valuable insights and tips for anyone facing a legal challenge. So tune in, take notes, and join us as we explore the ins and outs of the legal profession. A quick disclaimer, anything discussed in the podcast is general tips and advice, not formal legal advice. Always consult a lawyer. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Legal Connect podcast. Today, I am very excited to be joined by Tony Eden, and I'll just quickly give you a little bit of background on Tony because he's going to be a great guest for us today. So Tony received his BA in English Literature from UBC. They went on to receive his law degree with honors from the University of London. He specializes in the areas of estate litigation, family law, and personal injury, which will give us lots of different bases to cover today in our conversation. And he really enjoys the challenge of navigating the complex waters of litigation to assist clients. He's also successfully advocated for clients in the Supreme Court of British Columbia and has had the privilege of assisting senior counsel in the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court of Canada. And a little bit on a personal note, in his earlier years, he played really high-level ice hockey, yes, in both the United States and Canada. And now in his spare time, he enjoys traveling, playing in your adult hockey league, golfing, and skiing. So quite a wide range of hobbies there, and it sounds like you're in the right place being here in BC now.
Definitely,
right?
yeah. No, I'm currently located in Vancouver, but love spending time in the outdoors, so that's definitely a plus for me living in Vancouver.
Yeah, I live in Vancouver as well, and yeah, it's definitely, you have everything you need here. You have the nature, you have the city, you have the ocean, the water sports, you got really everything, right? So very excited to just chat with you and learn a little bit more about your background. And obviously, you're kind of working in a few different areas of law. So I'm sure the people listening today can definitely learn a lot from you when it comes to just some of these, common things that come up in these fields. But I want to kind of just start by you sharing. I know I already touched on your background a little bit and kind of where you went to school and some of your history there. But I'd love to know what actually brought you into the legal profession.
Yeah, so it was actually sort of a coincidence, and it has to do with my background in English literature. So I was a young hockey player and playing after I had sort of finished my junior career, and I was playing in a beer league, and I ended up playing with a lawyer on a men's league hockey team, and he needed someone to put together these sort of like longer memos or stories for his cases, and from there I sort of saw how a legal case, a litigation case, can be related to a story, and that's sort of how I built my philosophy around my practice. And I continue to write these memos for each case too, which comes in very handy, especially when as a lawyer you have many different files you have to work on. It gives you a background on each of them and a reference point all the time. So coming from an English literature background, I think, although it's sort of like a wide and general law or a general university undergraduate degree, it really set me up for success in law, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you describe law as almost a version of a story itself, because I haven't really heard anybody describe it that way before. But when you're building a case, absolutely, right? You have to look at all these different elements and see how they fit together. So I'm sure that background could definitely come in handy. And tell us a little bit more about Hammerco and how you kind of ended up.
So I was I started off with that articling with that one lawyer who I met playing hockey. That was Wes Musio Goodman, and we worked together for a number of years, and I really benefited and still have a good relationship with Wes, and he was a good mentor to me. From there, I decided to go sort of a different route. I went to and did some family law for a while. So I was a family law lawyer for a little bit. I still do some family law, not a ton, to be honest. I sort of like the estate litigation cases a little bit more. I think they're more interesting. They're less overly, I would say, not controversial, but conflict based. Family law, you can really get into some serious conflict where almost reason doesn't even come into play. And estate law it seems to be better for my my practice and for my sensibilities, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine there's quite a bit of almost like emotionally charged cases when you're dealing with family law as well. Although I'm sure estate law has some of that as well, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, how do you manage that? When there is like these kind of high emotions or things like that involved, how do you kind of, ensure that you are doing what's best for your client and making sure that those emotions don't kind of factor into
Well, I
your
think
decision making too much?
one very basic thing is to listen. So to know that these are always emotional situations for your clients, to give them the space to say what they need to get things off their chest, to be a sounding board, but then also to be a more um, like logical and practical voice that they can basically use. I mean, at the end of the day, being a lawyer is a service, and if we all just echoed everything our clients said, we wouldn't be doing that service to our clients. So I think it is important to take what your clients say, but also to tell them the legal ramifications, so that they don't necessarily instruct you because they're upset from a Christmas in 1985, right? So that there's always these emotionally charged backstories with clients, and estate litigation is one where that definitely happens. It's really important as a lawyer, I think, to take that in, but then let the clients know that um, you know this is the practical solutions are not going to change the past.
Exactly. Yeah. And it is nice too to have that, like, have that client feel like you are a lawyer that can listen to them, and, that they're sometimes that they're able to speak comfortably and openly with you, but at the same time that you're going to be that sounding board, as you say, for them. Because I don't feel like all lawyers necessarily have that sometimes. So it must be a
Certainly.
fine line to walk, right? Yeah, and setting your own
Mhm.
boundaries and things like that too. And I saw that you also work a little bit in personal injury law. Is that still
Yeah,
kind of
that
up to
I
date,
still
or?
do. That's sort of where I started off my career. There recently has been a change in the law in BC, and since then, those cases have sort of been winding down. For motor vehicle accident claims, certainly, we're not really seeing any new motor vehicle cases in BC, because of the change in the law to no fault. But there's still other types of personal injury claims that can be dealt with in British Columbia that aren't subject to no fault insurance. Slip and falls, assaults, and things where ICBC isn't involved. Those are still claims that can be made in BC, and I do deal with a number of those cases
Okay.
as well.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about the no fault and what that means, just for people that, maybe aren't as familiar with the legal field of the law? Like, yeah, how did that kind of change things, and why are those cases no longer coming
Well,
across
so
your desk now?
it's because of a change in government, really. When the NDP were voted in, they made a significant change to the legislation, and basically uh, did away with all tort claims, and that's what that means is before the change, you could, if you were injured by another person, it didn't really matter what the insurance regime was. You could still sue them for your complete losses. What the change to no fault does is it takes the hands out of the parties completely, and it puts it in the hands of essentially a government entity who they say, well, I'm going to pay for your treatment, and I'm going to pay you wage loss to a certain point, but lawyers can't be involved. It's all in the hands of the government. Um, I think it's honestly a very dangerous and scary place to be for British Columbians, and those especially who will be injured in the future in motor vehicle accidents. I mean, it probably won't affect the vast majority of British Columbians because hopefully they're not involved in motor vehicle accidents. But for those who are, I think we're as a province, we're really playing Russian roulette, and I think that's a little scary, to be honest.
Yeah, because why? It seems like an interesting decision to take the lawyers out of it when they're really the ones that have dealt with this for so long, and put it now into the
It's
government's hands.
exactly
Is what it
what
kind
it
of
is,
sounds like,
and
right?
it's not going to be good for those unfortunate people who are injured in motor vehicle accidents.
Yeah, well, that's good to know for anybody out there listening, as far as like the changes go, and like how to even approach that process, right? Because I'm sure most of them are just thinking about how
Yeah,
they
I
can
mean,
sue and
I think the
everything.
most
So,
important thing is almost political at this point. It's come time for an election year, make sure you're aware of the issues, and and that's the only way in the future that this is going to be changed, is if people are cognizant of the risk that the province is taking with people's livelihoods when it comes to motor vehicle insurance in BC.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of move over back to estate law for a second, because I know that the estates is kind of a lot of the work that you do now. So what are the most kind of common estate disputes or situations that you're encountering in your practice, and how do you help your clients?
So a very common one in BC that's actually unique to BC and also the maritime provinces is something that's called wills variation. So it's actually quite different than a lot of people think. When people think about estate disputes, they often think about undue influence claims, where someone is sort of coerced into writing the will in a way that benefits them. In British Columbia, there's actually a law which doesn't require children or spouses to do that. As long as they are children of the deceased or a spouse, they can actually apply to the court to vary the will on the basis that it's unfair. So a lot of my clients are children of the deceased, spouses of the deceased person who are cut out of the will for one reason or another and have assets in British Columbia. Mm-hmm. And that's an important factor too. Having assets in British Columbia really makes a difference, and otherwise those claims really are not going to be feasible. But that's a very common claim that can be made. Clients where I deal with a lot, and how I help them deal with it, really, there are a number of ways. The ultimate is really the court process. So filing pleadings in the court, attending a trial eventually. But between being engaged by a client and going to trial, there are a number of other steps in the litigation process. One of which is gaining a lot of popularity is mediation. So I work with really good mediators that are neutral parties, and they assist clients in coming to a resolution. There's also examinations for discovery within the process, document disclosure. We have to deal with sometimes unique situations within sort of that broad bucket. And so I've dealt with a whole range of situations. A very common practical, the most common practical or fact-based scenario, I would say, is really the second family issue. So when the deceased person has one family with a first spouse and then remarries and has a second family, there's inevitably a lot of conflict that comes from that. And if the estate isn't planned properly, carefully, and fairly, those estates could be subject to challenge.
Yeah, I have actually a couple of questions that come up just from, and thank you for that thorough answer and just explaining to people a bit more about how people would actually engage an estate lawyer. But the first thing is, when it comes to that wills variation, that's very interesting that that's able to be done now. Do you think that is a positive change for people? Or I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, it's not a change. Actually, that law has been around for a really long time. It's one of, the first, it goes back to, I think, the early 1900s. And it actually initially had to do with essentially the welfare of those individual spouses and children, so that they weren't reliant on government benefits. It's obviously changed, and the one thing that the seminal case, which is Tatterin from the Supreme Court of Canada, talks about is changing community standards. So that's the great thing about the common law, is that it constantly is evolving with our world, and in estate law, that's no different.
Yeah, for sure. Then the other thing I want to talk about that you touched on was mediation, because I don't think a lot of people know that mediation is necessarily an option they can pursue. So can you explain a little bit more about what the benefit is of maybe going with a mediator versus like going to court?
Yeah, I mean, the benefit is first of all, it takes all the decision-making power from a third party, the court, and puts it into the party's hands. So good mediators, what they always say is the power's in your hands, but you're both going to come out of the mediation, if it's successful, thinking that you gave something up. And that really that's the whole
Yeah.
purpose of the exercise. It is ultimately compromise, but you're eliminating all the risk of going to trial and also the cost. Mediators can be expensive, but the cost of going to trial in terms of time, in terms of risk, and then also legal fees of going to trial is substantial. Not to mention the court, how the court works in BC. It's very difficult to get trial dates. It's very easy to get bumped at the last minute. So there's just procedural risks as well in proceeding to trial.
Yeah, and when your clients are when they are pursuing mediation, are you still coming in and supporting them throughout that process, or at that point is it entirely handed over to the mediator?
The lawyers are there advocating for their clients with the mediator. The mediator provides as sort of a neutral third party to be able to bring the parties together, essentially. Because what happens in lawsuits is, I mean, as good as lawyers can be, they also take the side of their clients, and they can be very positional. So the mediator is there to try and be that voice of reason, that further voice of reason, that the further party to be not an arbiter, but someone who tries to be neutral and get both parties to see both sides. And that's the role. That's why they're called the mediators.
Yeah, that's a good explanation for just people who aren't as familiar with that, because I think a lot of people are still don't know that that's an option. So that's perfect. And then when it kind of comes to things like, I want to shift over to estate planning, and of course, you keep it general. You don't have to go into specific details and give people that legal advice. But do you have any tips when it comes to how to effectively plan your estate, and what kind of things you can have in place to avoid potential disasters down the road, even after you have maybe passed on, just to minimize, the amount of.
To be honest, I don't really do any estate planning. I'm the guy who cleans up the mess after it's already gone bad. So if every estate plan was perfect, I wouldn't have any work. But I would say just consult a good lawyer. That's really really the best thing to do. There's also good wealth advisors and accountants out there too. I think that's a big part of it. People, what I hear more and more is that people really do not want to effectively tax plan, and it's not always the best thing to do just to have a will and all your inheritance in your name when you pass away. Sometimes it makes sense to put it into a portfolio, or transfer property, or put it in corporations. I mean, everyone's circumstances will be different, and so they really should just speak to those individuals that have the specific expertise when it comes to estate planning and tax planning.
Yeah. That's a good advice. I think lots of people, it's something we don't want to think about, right? Because it's, uncomfortable, and the idea of thinking about what will happen after we, pass on, unless you're an older person, but unfortunately it can happen to younger people too, right? So in my opinion, you're never really too young to start thinking about these kind of things, right? Perfect. Yeah. So I wanted to, maybe if you can share, just on a more personal level, if there's a particularly challenging or memorable case that you've dealt with in your career, and it doesn't have to be super detailed, because obviously you want to protect the privacy of your clients and things like that. But anything that kind of sticks out as a moment in your career that really shifted, how you either view the law or I think
there's a number of cases that come to mind. I think just one in particular, and I won't go into details, but it was an individual who basically was abandoned by his father at a very young age. And then suffered from some mental health issues, which sort of set him up on a path to life that was unfortunate, and he struggled throughout his life. His father passed away with quite a large estate, and left the whole of the estate to his second wife and his second wife's child. So I was able to help that individual get a fair share of his estate, and also I did it on the basis of a contingency fee. So basically, I and my firm, we don't charge upfront fees for certain clients when it works out. It's not. We can't do contingency fee in any case, but in some cases, and especially for this individual who was low income, he couldn't afford to pay legal fees, and really, without doing the contingency fee model, there's no chance he would have been able to pursue the claim against his father's estate and get anything. So that was a situation that I was really happy and proud to get a really good settlement for my client and basically provide him life-changing money. Like, he had nothing, and now he has potentially some money to retire, to do the things that he couldn't do, that his father refused to provide for him during his life. So I was very happy with that.
That's amazing. Congratulations. Those must be the kind of rewarding cases that just stick with you throughout life, right? When you're able to help someone who's in a really disadvantaged position. And that actually opens up a really interesting thought about just access to legal aid and legal supports in general for people that are maybe lower income or are in these situations where, they've been abandoned or a parent has died or whatever it is, right? Obviously, contingency fees is one tool that you can use, but is there any other tools that people can maybe access if they are wanting to engage, you or your firm, and they maybe just don't have
there are in BC there are services like Access Pro Bono, Legal Aid BC. For us, contingency fee is the main model that we use to help those individuals. But I also do speak to clients, to potential clients, for 30 minutes for free, and so that's another service that we do provide.
Yeah, and I think that's important that people do utilize those kind of 30-minute calls if they can find lawyers that are willing to do them, complimentary as well, is because sometimes you need to talk to multiple lawyers to find someone that's a good fit with you.
Definitely.
Personally and professionally, right? Yeah. And as far as kind of clients that you're looking for right now, do you have, are you kind of limited to BC, or can anybody reach out to you from any province just based on the nature?
Yeah, I've had clients that are in Fiji, in the United Kingdom, the United States. It really has to do with where the estate is. If the estate is centered in BC, then I can assist. I mean, life can take you strange places, right? And so I do assist clients from all over, as long as the estate is in BC.
Yeah. Do you find that challenging, navigating perhaps, different time zones? I'm sure somebody in Fiji or the UK, how do you kind of navigate those communication barriers to make sure that you guys are able to
I think we're very lucky right now to be able to utilize technology the way we do. It's sort of a shame that the court isn't keeping up to that, to be honest. It's a sort of a constant struggle to be able to do that, or to use video conferencing services, even though they are available and very good. In fact, I've used them on a number of different trials, and they're great. But for whatever reason, the court just seems to not be ready philosophically to take full advantage of the services. So, for example, I have a trial coming up next month, and my client's in the United States. She's low income. And now she has to, because she's the plaintiff, she has to figure out a way to get up to Canada, stay on someone's couch for a week. It's just, it does limit access to justice in a way. And it's unfortunate that, we're not pushing harder to really fully use those services that are available.
Yeah, absolutely. The technology is there, right? It's just, these institutions, which obviously are a little bit outdated, just need to evolve with the times. But it's good to see that lawyers and law firms are definitely are adapting and finding ways now to make technology work in their daily practice. So, and then I guess also I want to talk about, lastly, a little bit about litigation before we kind of start to wrap up, and we'll ask you a few more personal kind of rapid fire questions at the end. But when it kind of comes to litigation and getting clients ready, to maybe go to court and things like that, do you have a process that you follow to get people prepared or just get them in the best mindset? Because I imagine it can be quite intimidating, especially for someone that's maybe never been, to trial and things like that. So what does that process look like?
Like you said, litigation can be a long process. When you end up getting on the stand, it's not like that's the first time you are going to be going over your evidence. There are steps beforehand. There'll be multiple conversations throughout and over the years. From the first meeting with the lawyer on, really, the lawyer should be trying to tease out and get the information that they'll eventually use at trial. So it's sort of a longer process that way. But as you get closer to trial, as I get closer to trial, I have a number of meetings with clients. I don't want to give away any of my trade secrets necessarily, but yeah, clients are. It's important to prepare a client for the trial, and that's definitely something that is weighs heavily on a lawyer before they're going to trial.
Yeah, I imagine too, it just being such a long process, especially if it's a years long, like, do people get fatigued, and how do you kind of keep them motivated throughout that journey, and just, almost
I think that sort of answers it. Letting them know that while it is a long process, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But I think being realistic with them from the beginning is important too, is to manage their clients' expectations, letting them know from the beginning that this isn't like TV. This isn't like you're going to go meet a lawyer and then next episode we're going to be in trial. No, this can last a long time. It can take a big toll on people emotionally, so they need to be prepared for that.
Yeah. And I think the thing is too, how do they, especially if it's someone that's maybe seeking, a large amount of money or an asset or something like that, and they won't have access to it obviously until the trial has ended, or hopefully things come out in their favor. How do they kind of is there ways that people can kind of access supports to stay afloat in the meantime, or they just have to kind of make do with what they have?
I mean, there are settlement lenders out there, but generally, yeah. I mean, the client is really having to support themselves, so that is difficult for them. But it's sort of a reality that needs to take place.
Yeah, absolutely. And having a good lawyer on your side is obviously a key part of that as well, for sure, so that you have the best chance of success, right? Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, I want to kind of just wrap up with a bit more of just getting to know you personally, so clients can just get to know your personality a little bit better and things like that. And the first thing I want to talk about is obviously hockey, actually, because it was a big part of your life.
I played a little junior. I played university in the United States for a year. I mean, I didn't really get close to playing in the NHL or anything, but played at decent high-level hockey and for my minor hockey as well. And yeah, I still enjoy it. Still like being part of the team and competing. So yeah.
Yeah. How do you think that, or I'm curious to see if hockey in some way, whether it's like the team building aspects or the anything like that, has affected your career as a lawyer at all, other than the fact that you obviously met your mentor and the lawyer that brought you into the firm, I think through the hockey. But. Just
being a part of on a team and having that competitive aspect to being in sports as well is very important for like a mindset when it comes to litigation as well. Unlike many other types of law, I mean, litigation is adversarial. So, you're having to work with a team to a certain goal, and it unfortunately is against another party. And there are winners and losers. So, law is different. Litigation is different than sports. I mean, it's not as black and white, but there's still that element of competition, certainly in everything we do as litigators.
Yeah, and that's one thing I think people don't talk about enough with sports is the mindset piece, because you really do have to be, very focused, very driven, and really. Almost like in the zone, very, very similar. I see a lot of parallels to the law, actually. So that's great. And then my next question for you is if you have any books that you're reading right now that have significantly impacted, whether it's the way it could be law, legal related, or just something that has impacted your mindset.
I like to read a lot, actually. My English literature background, and so I just read a book called Beartown, which was really good. And that's about a sexual assault in a Swedish town that's hockey driven, and so and it's the sort of law based and hockey based as well, so right up my alley. That was a really good one. And I also really like the sci-fi genre, so I was just reading this one called Upgrade by Blake Crouch. That was a real interesting sci-fi one on sort of like had some gene therapy elements in there, which caused some conflict and was a very interesting read.
Oh, nice. Yeah, thanks for sharing those. I forgot that you must have tons of recommendations, and you obviously must read a lot as someone with that English literature background. I found when I was in school, it almost like took away my love of reading because I was so used to reading because I had to, and you kind of forget the pleasure part of it sometimes, right? So, and I'm sure it's the same with you with law, but it's great that you've been able to still find space for that. What's something that not many people know about you? It can be something that's, maybe a hobby aside from hockey, or something that you enjoy doing, but just it might surprise people.
That's interesting. Some things that they don't know about. I take a sketch comedy class. Yeah. So I do that from time to time.
Okay,
I'll
cool.
drop into a sketch comedy class in East Vancouver, and so it's pretty fun.
Yeah. So what does the class entail? Like, are you going out and performing places?
Yeah, if they want it. It's with Blind Tiger Comedy. It's and we sort of like write and perform our own sketches. So it's a good time.
I think that's very cool. I love that you have all these creative interests, because I think sometimes when people think about lawyers, they don't often think of these kind of other creative pursuits, and that's why I like to ask that question, is because there's always things that surprise people when you hear about them that people wouldn't typically think of as lawyerish, right? That's awesome. And then the last thing is, what would you be doing if you weren't practicing law? If you weren't working in this field and you weren't working with clients every day, do you know what you'd be doing instead?
Probably, I would, in some capacity, a writer. But there's not a lot of money in that is the problem. But that's sort of, I don't know. That's what I would probably like to do if I wasn't a lawyer.
Yeah. Do you think there is ever a potential that you could maybe write, whether it's a book or something one day, is like maybe, it starts on the side as a side project? And then
who knows? Maybe I already have some stuff in the can.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very exciting. Well, we'll wait for you to share more on that. But the last thing I want to kind of just ask you is also, where do you see, what's next for you kind of in the legal field? Like, where do you kind of see yourself going over the next few years with it, whether it comes to, just being a better lawyer, or maybe moving to a different area of law? Where do you just kind of see yourself going in this field?
That's a good question. I feel like I'm sort of almost there in a way. Like I'm getting and helping clients that I feel like that are deserving and worthy of of assistance and being able to change their lives. I think that's really what I aim to do in law. I think just more of that, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. And it sounds like you're absolutely in it for the right reasons. You're looking for those clients that really do need your help. And obviously the work is very fulfilling for you. So that's great to hear. And then where can everybody find you? If people want to work with you, whether it's in those, so you said estate, a little bit of family, you're doing still a little bit of personal injury law. Is there anything else?
I do take clients in civil and commercial litigation as well. Just sort of those general areas, but not as frequently. It sort of depends on the case.
Okay. And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Yeah, if they would like to, your services or learn more about you or your firm.
I'm on all the social medias, LinkedIn. I'm on the Hammerco website is probably the best way, or sending me an email, which I think my email's on the Hammerco website as well.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Legal Connect podcast. We hope you found our conversation informative and helpful in navigating the process of hiring and working with a lawyer. Make the process of hiring a lawyer easier than ever and ensure the best match possible through our platform, lawtech.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.